Today, Precarious plays
Deus Ex, Mankind Divided.
Do you have a topic of conversation planned already?
Nope.
Okay.
Did you think I was kidding? You think I was messing around?
No. I just wanted to let that pause hold long enough to make any potential viewers think that that was going to be the end of the episode. Or perhaps that the...
A technical gaffe?
Yeah. Occasionally when the audio pauses for too long on a video that I'm only half watching.
Is it buffering? Did the internet go out?
Oh, gotta reset the router. And then I look down, it's like, no, they're just having a moment.
No, here's one of the big problems with playing an MMO. A lot of what I usually want to talk about, it's like, well, what game am I playing right now? And guess what game I'm playing right now? It's an MMO. Who cares? Who cares what's happening there?
Inconsequential small life things that occasionally give you a feeling of accomplishment. Like, I do know what's happening, actually, because I am a friend of yours and I care about your day-to-day. I know that you have a variety of flowers in your apartment now, and you have
an apartment now.
You have an apartment now with 2 aquariums, one of which was too small and sad, so you got a bigger aquarium, but you didn't get rid of the smaller aquarium in hopes of finding a small fish to put in there.
Yeah, like just a little teeny tiny shrimp or something.
Because I'm a good friend and I care about my friends redecorating their virtual apartments.
Yeah, you know what? I guess we are talking about MMOs again. I wasn't going to, but I'm immediately getting fired up, and I realize that I've got more to say on the subject. So let me tell you something. People told me, people promised me, it's like, if you play past A Realm Reborn, that's when the story gets good. Dan Floyd of Extra Credits and now Playframe fame.
Good acrobatics there.
Yeah.
Stuck the landing.
Thank you. Promised, if you can stick with the bad first season, as he put it, you'll be rewarded with possibly one of the best Final Fantasy stories ever. And I am quite cross with that assessment, because let me tell you, I'm already in the zone. I'm where I'm supposed to be, right? What? Oh, okay. No, but we already kind of knew this, I think. Okay, so I thought that there was a panel that let you open that back door. Is it possible that you could come back here? Well, anyway,
You're in the story zone.
I'm in
quote-unquote good season.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be in the good content, and it's just Final Fantasy Tactics. It's Heaven's Ward is...
That's your favorite one? No.
No, Final Fantasy Tactics is one of my... Yeah, it is my favorite Final Fantasy.
I thought 9.
And no, so a lot of people are like, oh, well, the side games don't count. No, that's garbage. The side games, if it's got Final Fantasy in the title, I don't care if...
So 9 is your favorite for the lists that explicitly exclude anything that isn't a numbered...
A mainline entry, yeah.
Like, come on, okay.
Yeah, whatever.
Anyways.
Bunch of... I think that's moving the goalposts.
Yeah, but you love Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yeah, Final Fantasy Tactics is one of my favorite games, and it's got one of my favorite stories. Here we go. Doors open. All right. So I was right. There is a way.
So you've just You're just disappointed because they're dredging up an old good storyline?
Well, no, hold on. Let me explain.
Right.
Let me save and then explain. The problem that I'm having is that this was very recently promised. Like, it was declared so clearly. One of a very good story and one of the best Final Fantasy stories that's been told. And I mean, I feel like that kind of exclusionary thinking was tactics even in the running. It's weird and it makes me mad for a few different reasons. Because, I mean, one, it's like, I kind of feel like I've had my time wasted a little bit right now. Because so far, unless they do something really, really impressive in the last few hours of the Heavensward story, or if they further expand on it after that, like in Stormblood, which I've actually heard is kind of on the weak side again, before it picks back up in Shadowbringers, I think is the name of the one after that. Final Fantasy Tactics covered a lot of the same ideas, at least as well, if not better, much more expediently, literally decades ago.
Yeah.
So can you understand my frustration?
Well, yeah.
Because
I do understand why they would choose to reach back, though, because it was literally decades ago. Who's gonna remember that?
some of the same people were involved on both projects.
No, I mean, like, they were probably doing that on purpose because, like, this was really good. Let's make sure some people see more of it.
But it has not been sufficiently updated. Like, they didn't even... So, one of my problems with Final Fantasy Tactics story, I now look at it with the same kind of... I would say that there's a problem with Final Fantasy Tactics story where a lot of it has to do with noble obligation, right? So people that can drive goodness in the world, they ought to. Like, they have a social responsibility to do that thing, right? Noblesse, oblige, I think, is the term. Noble obligation. I increasingly resent a lot of fantasy stories because they focus on the nobility, right? Like, I hated a lot about Three Houses, but Fire Emblem Three Houses, it like quickly lost a whole lot of points as I realized that it was very much like ooh, look at the glamorous lives of the nobles. Even the people that are ostensibly commoners, right? They still made it. They're still not everyday people because they, you know, like one of the most salt of the earth types. I'm already starting to forget their names because honestly, like, they didn't leave much of an impact. I think her name might have been Leonie, maybe. She was a red-haired cavalier type, right?
Yeah.
She is a bumpkin, but all of her, everybody that lived in the village knew that, like, she had the knack to be a war fighter. So they all pitched in, and it's like, you're going to military academy.
Yeah.
Even if we all have to go hungry this winter.
Yeah.
So that is still, like, that's on the absolute, like, sort of sweetest end, where a bunch of common folk got together to better the lives of one of them, and then presumably, like, that might pay off for them later, but it doesn't seem like that was... I don't think any of them were being that tactical. I think they just wanted her life to be better. That story is a standout. It's all just, people that have lived privileged lives continuing to live privileged lives, just like the decadence in the cafeteria.
Yeah.
Kind of makes my blood boil. Just that, just that one part of it. The designer food waste that has to happen there. I don't know. It's a scummy environment, and the game ultimately, I don't think it does enough to cast doubt and decry that environment. That's an unfortunate graphical error.
Leaky roof.
Extremely. Anyway, I feel like if there was a problem with Final Fantasy Tactics story, it is a bit about a noble that walks away from that light. And after a certain point, there's no going back. But it's pretty easy to look at it and kind of think like, oh, the protagonist is basically like the protagonist, one of the protagonists from Rent, where it's sort of like this touring of poverty that happens, where like they could go back anytime they wanted to, if they just like swallowed their pride. Now, fortunately, I think they do enough work to avoid that. And again, after a certain point, it's like, no, the protagonist, he's declared a heretic. He's excommunicated. His land's entitled. Like his family is stripped of everything, So there really is. He's a commoner at that point, And what's more, he's a wanted. He's a commoner that's wanted by the state and the church. So what was this even? What was all of this even about? I was playing it maybe like an hour before we started recording.
Yeah.
And I'm flustered because I've been pouring so much of my time trying to get to the good part. And honestly, right now, I just feel like, oh, so I got to the good part 20 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, so this is I
got to the good part.
Subpar version of something I've already seen.
Well, I don't know if I would describe it as subpar. I would just describe it as a retread. And one that takes a lot longer to cover almost the exact same ground. And it's like they almost did it. Like there's a side story that I actually have been enjoying a lot about the mechanists of the city state, the city that you're helping. They are mostly commoners, but there's one noble who's like, no, like we can turn this war that's happening with these dragons around because we can train a commoner to use a gun in like a few weeks. It takes years to train a knight, and they usually die. But these commoners with their guns are coming back, like battle after battle. This is the future. And like, that's interesting. And if that had been like the main story, if it was, this could have been an opportunity to have a more commoner-centric focus of basically the same framework, So instead of having a noble that steps away from their nobility because it's the right thing to do, because that's just where the pursuit of justice has leads them. If it had just been like, no, I start the game as a commoner, and my friends are just commoners, and together they shape the world. With their adversaries being the noble class, that could have been a more compelling, satisfying modern take on that story. It's kind of like how one of my favorite Fire Emblems, as far as like, it's got some issues mostly about presentation that sort of hold it back in my mind, but Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, I think, is the GameCube one. I always confuse Path and Dawn of Radiance. I'm pretty sure Path of Radiance is the first one. I really like that story because Ike is essentially a commoner. You know, your protagonist is kind of a commoner. It's messed up a little bit because your dad winds up being like a really big deal knight. But at least you're like one generation removed. So it's like, yeah, I was educated by a former noble. But I like, at one point Ike says that his most important object, like the most important tool that he has in his life, is his cape. Because it keeps the wind and the rain off, and you can use it as a blanket when you go to sleep.
Yeah.
And that is such a humanizing thing, and that you don't get that kind of experience from a pampered, noble class of character.
He's like, I must have my cologne.
Right. So I prefer Ike and his him basically being a commoner. And it's funny because at a midpoint in the story, he's told that he's not allowed to participate anymore because the forces in charge, they need someone who can lead an army. And commoners aren't allowed to lead armies. But then you have, at that point in the story, Ike has impressed a very high-ranking group of individuals, so they make him a lord.
They're just like, here you are.
So, you know how in Blazing/Burning Blade, I think Lindis, Hector, and Eliwood all start as the Lord class?
Yeah.
That is what Ike promotes into halfway through the game. And that's kind of cool. That's interesting, just where like the narrative and the mechanics are converging.
Yeah.
But his reaction to it, because it does the whole like da 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 song and dance. And I think he's just like, huh.
Could have done that sooner.
Well it's just, he's basically unfazed by it. And my favorite thing, at the end of the story, he renounces his lordship, his title, and he just becomes a mercenary again. And then whenever you see him in Dawn of Radiance, he's just I think his new class is just like Great Hero or something. So he basically goes his own way after the story is over, obtains the same level of power and influence after having renounced his noble title. And it was just really disappointing in Three Houses seeing them like triple down on the let's follow the expensive lives of the nobles, shall we? And seeing that again also in Heaven's Word, it's just not what I want from these fantasy games. That's all.